I'm playing the singles league over Daventry now, and I'm much better tired and much better.
You have clearly a sense of humour. I can hear from your voice that you've got a smile on your face, and maybe that helps you through. But I'm really indebted to you for sharing that, because, you know, white people don't know about racism in the country, so it's not for us to say. And it's fascinating here from people that have experienced it. Gav, thank you. Have a lovely time in Sorrow this Sunday. Hey, David Lammy's joined us from the rural paradise of East. Does this ring a bell with you?
Well, you know, I spent 7 years of my life in the great city of Peterborough and spent a lot of time in East Anglia. And there's a part of me that pines for rural Britain. I love being in rural Britain. Have I encountered racism over the years? Yes, I have, but I've got to tell you, not for a good 20 years or so. So I'm going to do this item, and I'm looking forward to what people are going to tell me, because the truth is, this is, you know, people are living all corners of the country now. You know, I've got family in rural Wales. You know,
I was intrigued by the white guy who's moved to Norfolk, and he says that the prejudice isn't just reserved for black people, it's anyone that doesn't come from the county. And I thought maybe there's something in that too.
So I'm going to do that. The NHS has a new survey that suggests the number of children suffering from mental health conditions is increasing. 5 young people now with mental disorders. What's going on? You know, are we too hard on our children? Is the question I want to ask. And then, of course, I'm going to return to this big issue of the Princess of Wales and her cancer diagnosis. But I want to look at it from the point of view of those of us who've been in the situation. How do you break it to your family? How do you discuss it with your kids, particularly if they're young? Both my parents died of cancer. I remember the issues in very real time, and so I want to talk about cancer. It touches so many of our lives. How do you do this? How do you live with cancer well?
David Lammy, that sounds like good listening. David Lammy joining us at 10. I'll be speaking to Conservative MP Gareth Davies after the news on LBC from Jenny Barsby.
A national day of mourning has been announced in Russia for the 133 people killed in Friday's terror attack near Moscow. More than 140 people were injured when gunmen opened fire in a crowded concert hall. Multiple explosions have hit Kyiv, and the whole of Ukraine has been placed on alert after Russia launched a wave of airstrikes. Poland says it's activated its air force after missiles were fired close to its border. And candidates who want to be the next Prime Minister of Ireland have until 1 p.m. to express their interest. The Minister for Further and Higher Education, Simon Harris, is the only contender so far in the contest. LBC weather, a largely dry day for most of us with some sunny spells, staying breezy with a high of 12 degrees.
For future generations, and it's low carbon, it's the UK's target of net zero emissions. Tomorrow on Nick Ferrari at breakfast, thanks to EDF, we'll be looking into the changes that need to be made to prepare our homes for a low carbon future. By the Residential Operations Director at EDF, Camilla McCorkle, to discuss how people can save cash while reducing their carbon footprint. That's all coming up tomorrow with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. I'm Matthew Wright. You're listening to LBC. It's 9:31.
This is LBC.
Keeping your home energy efficient is great for the environment and can help.
For me, it was like transforming my social circle, my job, my life. In many ways, losing my identity, which was very hard as well, because we often associate who a person is as what they do, and that's obviously not true, but I sort of lost and transformed almost everything.
Douglas Stewart judging a book by a cover, and Tanny Gray-Thompson, the Dame and sporting legend. We turn to Johnny Diamond now. We look ahead to life on Radio 4 at 1. Johnny, what will happen?
Well, we're going to pick up where you left off with Russia, Paddy, this morning on this National Day of Mourning after so many lives
were taken. We look at the events of the weekend through the eyes of Russians. We're going to focus on Vladimir Putin and his legitimacy with the Russian people, 25 years of power in exchange for safety and security. We'll hear the rumbling echoes of previous bombings and hear how the attack on a family concert is already a matter of international division. All of that and something completely different right at the end of the programme. You're on Radio 4.
The world this weekend. Back in the present, this is BH. Thanks, Johnny. We'll treat you to a full news review. We don't know yet what the subjects are. James Nocte returns with the US series that he's been thrilling us with on the last Sunday mornings, and we'll find out what's happened to the eggs Benedict made by Clodagh McKenna, invented by a machine. It's 9:34. It's Sunday the 24th of March. It's BBC Radio 4. I'm Paddy O'Connell. Here with the headlines is Lisa.
A day of mourning is being observed in Russia for the victims of Friday's attack on a concert hall just outside Moscow. The Kremlin insists Ukraine was involved, despite credible claims from the Islamic State group. Ukraine says it's hit 2 large Russian ships used by the Black Sea Fleet. Russia also attacked Ukraine overnight, sending a barrage of missiles into the western Lviv region and the capital Kiev, though no casualties were reported there. The Prince and Princess of Wales have said they're enormously touched by the messages of support they've received since Catherine announced she was being treated for cancer. Simon Harris is expected to be named as the new leader of Fine Gael, paving the way for him to become Ireland's youngest Prime Minister at 37.
Felicity's listening. She sent this email to our inbox. We get regular emails all the time, and we'd just like to read you this one. Hello, I was found to have a malignant breast tumour. Like everyone else, I wondered how I was going to tell my children 10 and 8. Don't underestimate their ability to cope, says Felicity, who's listening now. I had hoped to enter the house without seeing either of them before I saw my husband, but in fact walked straight into my son zooming a spaceship around our living space. We had been open with them, but now he asked me directly what was the result. I told him in the simplest terms I could about a lump which had needed to be removed and some treatment to clear up the area. Ah, he said, it's as if the Klingons have invaded Deck D on the Starship Enterprise and Captain Kirk has sealed off the whole deck. They'll get rid of the Klingons, and then they'll open up the deck again. Hug, kiss, back to the spaceship, says Felicity. Well, in fact, this got us thinking about that very question. How, indeed, to tell the children? Prince George is 10, Princess Charlotte is 8, and Princess Louis is 5.
William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. As you can imagine, this has taken time. It has taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment. But most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay.
How do you tell the children? Simone Baldwin was diagnosed with a benign brain tumour in 2017. She wrote Mummy Has a Lump, a book for parents explaining a similar diagnosis to a young family.
As a parent, you want to protect and look after your children, don't you? And then when you are yourself facing a difficult diagnosis, you want to consider how you're going to then protect and shield your children from any upset that's going to cause and impact that's going to have on your children.
Is there a sense in which timing coincides with prognosis?
Oh, obviously everybody's very, very different, but for me, absolutely, that was very important. The doctor giving me my diagnosis was not a specialist in that field, so I had to be referred on to a specialist. So at that time, it sort of raised more questions than answers. We decided at that time to hold off telling my children until I'd had that follow-up appointment, and that time was very, very difficult. I felt like I was hiding something at that time.
Did you feel like you were cheating them?
Yes, absolutely that. But in the long term, that was the right decision for me, because then when I did decide to tell my children, I had a few more answers to their questions.
Do you think this diagnosis of yours has changed them?
Yes. I like to think it's given my family the strength to deal with the different things that life's going to throw at you. I think one of my proudest moments, so I use a stick now as a result of my treatment and surgery, but more recently I heard my youngest being asked by one of his friends, why does your mum use a stick? And I heard him say, well, my mum has a lump in her head. And he made me sound like a superhero, and I felt so proud that he didn't skip a beat, he didn't fumble for words, he just spoke about it so matter of fact, And I felt I'd given him that confidence and that power to deal with it like it was an everyday thing. And I think, well, if nothing else has come from my situation, I've empowered him to talk about it, deal with it. And so that's it's not all bad, is it?
Just there, use the word lump, which is the title of your book. You changed the words, and I've heard parents say, actually, you know, older children can be told what death is. Younger children have to be perhaps explained in different ways. You didn't have a diagnosis of a terminal disease. You had a benign brain tumour. It is very complicated to explain. What did you decide to do with words that would help fill in the picture in the book, as it were?
I avoided using the word tumour. It's called a lump, because then I feel it's up to a parent to decide what language and terminology they want to use with their children, and only the parent will know what they feel is right with their children. And then you just fill in as time goes on, and at the time that feels right later on. I would still start with a very gentle language, and as the situation unfolds, and build up gently, rather than going straight in with the big bang words straight away, I think.
The big bang words. Yeah, it's funny you say it, because it used to be called the big C. The adults had a problem calling it cancer, didn't they? It had to be given its own letter. You're nodding, I think.
Yeah, it's a very scary word, isn't it? One of the things that when I was trying to explain to my son was things like going for a scan. One of the things I struggled to explain was that he was concerned was things like, well, what is a scan? And I tried to find pictures of certain things like that to explain that I was going for an MRI. And when you search for pictures of an MRI scanner to try and explain things to children, they all look incredibly clinical and incredibly medical. And so one of the things I wanted to include in the book was to not patronise children, to help explain those things to children properly, but in a slightly less sterile, less clinical way. And so there's pictures of an MRI machine, for example, that have been hand-drawn by the illustrator Caroline, who's done the most gorgeous, gentle watercolour pictures. And it's things like that I think children are often overlooked in that medical environment.
So can we hear an extract in your own words of the author from Mummy Has a Lump?
Mummy has a lump. It's growing in her body. It isn't meant to be there, so it might make her feel funny. The doctors and the nurses will have to do their best. The lump is getting in the way. It's a most unwelcome guest. The hospital might test the lump to work out how to treat it. The more they know, the more that they can do to try and beat it. You can ask if you have questions about what's happening, or maybe you just want to play. Talking might not be your thing. Everyone is different. Every mum is different too. So how you choose to deal with things is entirely up to you. Maybe Mummy can't do the things she used to for a while, but she'll do the best she can in her own new Mummy style. We don't know all the answers, or how long these things could take, but we know that Mummy loves you, and a great team you will make.
With thanks to Simone Baldwin, who's book Mummy Has a Lump, which takes us back really to where Rory began with us half an hour ago on how you tell children and how you balance that with public life, which very much is the theme, I think, of really the last few days. David Smith has been on holiday in the Dominican Republic. The other Sunday programmes have missed this oddly. Each evening, my wife and I walked through the beautiful gardens of the hotel, and not long before dusk, birds started getting ready to roost in one particular tree. Here, for your slow radio, is the great Antoninian grackle with the peacock in the background. I thought it may be of interest to your loyal listeners, of which I am one, admits David. Although I have learned to never identify birds, ever. So I'll leave it up to you listening, and if you're wrong, you have to blame yourself. The United States was founded by the brightest people in the country, and we haven't seen them since. So said the Washbush Liberal Gore Vidal. With Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the US faces its first presidential rematch since 1956. We've turned to our special correspondent, the only way we knew how to compare past with present.
This is James Naughty. Pumpkins on the porches, American flags hanging from the clapperboard houses. Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona. We can now say that the 45th president will be Donald Trump.
A reminder from Jim that the 45th faces the 46th. Today, Jim asks why the leaders of Russia and the United States appear obsessed with each other, especially in election years. For this, the end of his BH series, he looks ahead to the next few months. He hopes you can see it here first.
An election in the land of the free, but in some quarters, autocracy is strangely popular.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin.
Tucker Carlson, late to Fox News, now star of his own right-wing online show, at Vladimir Putin's feet in the Kremlin in February.
Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself.
Though he was widely mocked for pandering, and Putin himself delivered a humiliating slapdown, saying afterwards that he was disappointed not to have been asked tougher questions. It was telling.
One of our senior United States senators said that we have to continue to fund the Ukrainian effort. How do you assess that?
Do the United States need this? What for? Thousands of miles away from your national territory. Don't you have anything better to do?
The Carlson interview, with Putin's words voiced by a translator, highlighted one of the defining marks of the Trumpist right, a pro-Putin, anti-Ukraine outlook that is no time whatever for Volodymyr Zelensky. Donald Trump recently told the Hungarian hardman Viktor Orbán that as president he wouldn't give a penny to Ukraine's war effort. A Republican world turned upside down.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Berlin, 1987. Ronald Reagan, godfather to the modern American conservative movement. He had befriended the former Mikhail Gorbachev in his grandfatherly way, but all in the cause of winning the Cold War. Earlier, he'd made a radio broadcast directed at the Russian people.
This is Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America. Progress in resolving humanitarian issues in the spirit of cooperation will go a long way to making 1986 a better year for all of us.
Alistair Cook, who we've been hearing from in these last few weeks as the chronicler of modern America, on Reagan, the genial Cold Warrior, who spent a lifetime fighting Soviet communism.
Millions of ordinary, non-official Russians had never before been talked to by this President of the United States. And on New Year's Day, they discovered the details and horns and fangs.
Reagan today would surely be bewildered by his ideological successors. Yet Trump gives the impression of never having met an authoritarian he doesn't like, and there's no doubt that as president, a string of ex-officials from his first administration confirmed this. He can unpick the Western Security and Defense Alliance that's been fixed in place for 75 years, NATO not being his cup of tea. A reminder that in his takeover of the Republican Party, not all of it, but enough, he's offering a more radical program than any living American has seen before.
We are going to have the largest deportation effort in the history of our country. We're bringing everybody back where they came from. We have no choice.
There are huge numbers of undocumented immigrants in the United States. Many settled for a couple of generations and more, working and paying their taxes. Well, in a Trump administration, he says they would be rounded up and removed from the country, and he would hire privately employed militias, sending them, as he likes to put it, from Republican red states into Democrat blue states to do the job. Imagine the resistance, the physical clash in the streets. This is a new republicanism of a kind we haven't seen before, deliberately confrontational, with an anger that Reagan never deployed, and a zeal to undo much of the administrative superstructure that's developed in the United States over the last 50 or 60 years. superb Republican in Congress, daughter of the deeply conservative former Vice President Dick Cheney, now on the warpath against Trump.
The future of the democracy.